a question. I was wondering if you could make a video about wanting to ascend from Earth versus people who just want to get away from here. I know the difference seems subtle, but I sense this is important for those of us who actually want to ascend versus spiritualizing escapism. Also, I guess maybe saying why you want to ascend from Earth. I personally feel I've had enough of Earth, but I'm still relatively new to the spiritual path, especially the inner path, so I'm unsure whether my desire to leave is driven by me truly having had enough of Earth versus my separate selves wanting to get out of here, which is kind of funny anyways, since separate selves are bound to Earth and cannot really leave here. Please help. Okay, it is a very important topic because what you see a lot in spiritual movements is this desire for escapism, or spiritual bypassing, as some people call it. And it's a topic that I've talked about in quite a number of my videos, where you misuse, or you allow the ego to misuse a spiritual teaching to make you think that by following this outer path, defined by this guru, this organization, this teaching, you don't have to look at your own psychology. You can, become enlightened, be saved, ascend, by just doing the outer things. So I have a breakthrough video where I talk about the outer path versus the inner path, and I talk about it in other contexts as well, because it really is kind of the essential topic for many people on the spiritual path, because they have found the spiritual path. They realize there is a way to raise your consciousness, but they haven't quite made that shift of realizing that raising your consciousness isn't going to happen automatically by following an outer path. It's only going to happen by looking at psychology and resolving psychology. So it's a good observation, as it says in the question, that it's the separate selves we have. And I've talked about that in several breakthrough videos, also on many other videos, where we have these subconscious selves that we have created. It's the separate selves that want us to get out of here, versus actually growing to the point where we're ready to leave. And it is an irony, because the separate selves are created on Earth and can never escape Earth. But the separate selves actually don't want to escape Earth. They want to escape specific conditions. So, you look back, and I even describe in my avatar videos how many of us who are spiritual people, we came to Earth to make a positive difference here. And then we were attacked, put down, we received this birth trauma that changed the way we look at Earth and the way we relate to Earth, because now we have created these selves, the primal self, that reacts to being on Earth as a very unpleasant place where we actually really don't want to be here. And that's something you'll find in many spiritual people. So, you can find videos that talk about spiritual bypassing, spiritual escapism. But I would rather look at it that it's actually very, very understandable that people have this reaction. Because this trauma that we received, often in our first embodiment on Earth, was very, very severe. And we still carry these selves with us that we created in reaction to this trauma. So it's very understandable that we have this reaction. And it really doesn't do you any good to say, oh, you should get over it. You should just suppress that reaction. It's not spiritual. What is spiritual is to look at it and say, why do I have this reaction? Why do I have this reaction that I want to get away from Earth? It must be because sometime in a past life, I received a very severe trauma, and I'm still carrying with me the effects of this trauma, which is the separate selves that you created in order to deal with the trauma. You're still carrying this with you. And it's unpleasant. And you want to get away from that tension, that unpleasantness. And, as I've said in some of my talks about the ego, the ego will take a spiritual movement. And it will say, because you're in this movement, just follow all the outer directions, live up to the outer standard, you are guaranteed to reach the goal. You don't have to look for me, the ego. And this is, of course, a lie. It can't ever happen. But it's understandable that we go into this reaction, especially when we're new to the path, because it can be unpleasant to look at this trauma. I mean, I have been on the spiritual path for over 47 years. And if you had given me the teachings when I was 18 years old, that you have this birth trauma, this very severe trauma, and you need to look at it and overcome it, I couldn't have done it back then. It would have been too much for me. It would have plunged me into some kind of, tension that I don't think I could have dealt with. So it took me a number of years of practicing the decrees and invocations to transform the energy that were caused by this birth trauma. And using the teaching of the Ascended Masters to look at less severe traumas in my psychology. So it took me a long time before I was at the point where I could start looking at this birth trauma. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's understandable that even the conscious you can have a desire to get away from something because it's unpleasant to deal with it and it feels overwhelming. Especially when you don't know what it is you're dealing with and you don't have a teaching and the tools to deal with it. So the revolutionary thing about the Ascended Masters' teachings is that they have given us these teachings about these traumas, these separate selves, and they have given us practical tools for dealing with it. So if you use that, you can get to a point where you can start dealing with this, you can start overcoming the traumas. And the wonderful thing about that is simple. If you think about it, why do you want to get away from something? Because it's unpleasant. But it's constantly unpleasant, right? You're constantly suffering from this tension that you have to cover over. So the ego is going to try to tell you that if you look at it, it's going to be even worse. You are going to be overwhelmed by these feelings. And you might be for a short time. But then when you go through it all and resolve it, you're going to be free from that long-term tension you have carried with you for many lifetimes. So what I'm saying is, it's understandable that people react to finding the spiritual path by going into escapism. It's understandable that people come to believe, oh, now I don't have to look at all of this unpleasant stuff in my psychology and my subconscious mind. Just have to sit at the feet of the guru, absorb his vibration, give these practices, study these teachings, and then one day, poof, I'm going to be enlightened. As I said, I've been on the spiritual path for 47 years. I haven't yet heard the poof, and I don't think it's ever going to come. So it's much better, in my view, to follow a systematic path, take a little bit at a time so you don't get overwhelmed, and chip away at this. And quite frankly, if you are a spiritual person, if you are sincere about the spiritual path, why would you keep carrying something with you that's burdening you? Instead of doing something about it so you can be free of it. Isn't it better to invest in the short term, in making an effort in the short term, and then being free for the rest of your lives, instead of carrying this burden with you for the rest of your life? So what I'm saying is, it's understandable that people get pulled into this escapism, thinking that the outer path is going to bring them to the goal. But the higher understanding, the higher way of dealing with the spiritual path is to say, no, I am willing to look at myself. I am willing to look at it in step by step until I resolve what is the cause of my personal tension with being on earth. What is it I want to get away from? Because listen to what I've been saying here. In a past life, we received this enormous trauma. It's not the situation we're trying to get away from, because the situation is gone. It happened in a past life, maybe thousands of years ago. What are we trying to get away from? Our reaction to the situation. What is our reaction to the situation? Where is it located? In one or more of these subconscious selves. That's where the reaction is. So whenever you have an outer situation that touches upon this original trauma, The self is activated, you have the pain. Then you have another self that's created to suppress the pain. And there's a constant tension. Something stirs up the pain, something has to suppress it, and you are caught in the middle. And you have been caught in the middle all your life, probably for lifetimes. So if you really want to get out of Earth, you have to resolve this. Because as long as you have it, you are going to reincarnate as long as you have it. You are not going to ascend with this unresolved psychology. You're not going to get out of Earth with this unresolved psychology. If somebody tells you you can, they're lying to you. They either don't know they're lying or they're deliberately lying. But they're lying to you. The only way, there are three ways, as I usually say, to get out of Earth. Resolve psychology, resolve psychology, resolve psychology. And that's the only way. So it is a matter of getting to that point where you say, okay, I'm willing to do this. Here are the teachings I can use. Here's a method I can use. I'm going to give it a shot. And now let's go on to this ascending versus escapism. So what I'm saying is, as long as you are trapped in these reactionary patterns, as long as you have these subconscious selves, the selves want to escape the unpleasantness, the unpleasant feeling, the overwhelming feeling. But when you resolve these selves, then you are free to evaluate, do I really want to get out of here yet? Do I want to ascend after this lifetime, or do I want to embody again? And for some people, they will want to embody again because they'll say, okay, now that I have resolved the trauma I had in relation to being on Earth, it isn't unpleasant for me to be here, and I actually want to help bring about Saint Germain's golden age. That's my vow that I've taken in my divine plan. So I want to keep doing that until I feel the golden age is manifest to a certain degree and I can move on. But there are also some people that it is in their divine plan to ascend after this lifetime, meaning permanently leave the Earth behind, not reincarnate. And this is something you really can't decide with the outer mind. I mean, you can decide it with the outer mind. I have, in my second spiritual movement, there were many, many members of that movement that decided with the outer mind, I want to ascend after this lifetime. And they believed that if they followed the outer path and gave 3 or 4 hours of decrease a day and studied the teachings, then they would make it. But again, without the resolution of psychology, nothing else you do matters. So what I'm saying is, when you get beyond the reactionary patterns, when you get rid of these separate selves, and the conscious you is more free to connect to your higher self, to your I Am Presence, that's when you can begin to tune into your I Am Presence, and you can know, does the I Am Presence want to leave Earth behind? Does your higher self actually want you, the conscious you, to ascend? And, when you tune into that, you're naturally going to want to do what your I Am Presence wants to do. Because when you are in attunement with your I Am Presence, you can't be in attunement with your I Am Presence and at the same time be in opposition to your I Am Presence. If the I Am Presence says, I've had enough of Earth, I want to move on to either other planets or to the ascended realm, then the conscious you is going to say, yeah, that sounds good to me. You really don't have a will as the conscious you that's separated from the I Am Presence once you start having attunement and a sense of oneness with the I Am Presence. It can only be the separate selves that have a separate will. So, in terms of me personally, as the question asks, well, it's just, as I said, something that's come to me intuitively over the years. I started out, of course, in my second spiritual movement, deciding with the outer mind, yes, I want to get out of here. I've had enough of this planet. And that was spiritual escapism. But as I've resolved more and more of these traumas and the birth trauma, I don't have a need to get out of here. I mean, if the Ascended Masters were to say, we want you to embody again to give a service, I would say yes. Of course, if my I Am Presence also was in agreement with that. But if my I Am Presence wants to ascend, then that's what I want to do, because I look at Earth and there isn't really anything I want to do here, that I want to accomplish here, that I want to experience here. And it's just a sense, it's not something I'm willing myself to do. It's just a sense of peace, Time to move on. There's no tension about it. It's not a decision I'm making at the level of the conscious you. It's just a sense, yeah, let's flow. flow into the ascended realm. But you can't get to that point until you get beyond all of these traumas and tensions and these subconscious selves. Because as I said, the subconscious self, they want to get away from the unpleasantness. They don't want to get away from Earth. They can't even conceive of getting away from Earth. But they want to get away from the unpleasantness. And you can come to a point where you have resolved so much of this that you don't have a reaction to Earth that makes it unpleasant to be here. But you can still feel like, it's enough. It's just enough.